Yeah, well, first I wanted to say this call has been very juicy and meaty, and I love it. And I love everyone who's asked the question. But what stood out to me is this willingness came up a lot of times, and I can feel when I feel like unwillingness, it feels like no, 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 and so that's resistance. Um, and when there's willingness, that means that it's included, that whatever that willingness to be or do or whatever it's included in whatever feels better. So nothing's off limits or off. There's no no, because everything is included and everything's a possibility when what you really want to do is feel better.
Right. Exactly.
That's
Because what you're doing is you're taking the topic and you're reorienting it from unwanted column and putting it into the wanted column. Then there's the thing that happens after that. After you get willing, after you're open to it, it begins to change. Because it was your resistance that kept it static. Like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And so the this kept being the same thing, right? It was consistently the same thing. No, no, I don't want this. This was always the same. You put it over into the wanted column by using your willingness and allowing yourself to be okay with it, whatever it is. It's okay. It will work itself out. It's temporary. I'm okay with doing it. I'm okay with having it. I don't like it, because you're not putting it in the like column. You're putting it into the wanted column. And when things go into the wanted column, in the wanted column, you said it very well. Everything is allowed. So maybe it would be better to say the allowed column as opposed to the not allowed. So you put it into the allowed column, and by its very nature, it must evolve. It must evolve, and it does. You'll notice these things, they seem so intensely static, and they're grounded, and they're big, huge, gigantic things. You put them in the wanted column, and if you let them be there, they'll turn into sort of like ephemera. They turn into nothing. You realize that what you thought was a big wall was just, sand. And with just the slightest breath, it collapses.
That's very powerful.
Happen. Well, what's interesting is, yes, we could say it's powerful, and that's a good word, but its power lies in the openness,
yes,
which is where all the real power is, right?
And I think we often are unwilling because we thought that, well, that's how you keep things you don't want away. Or
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that's for. No. This all falls under the more general topic of how you manage your universe. And when you realize that you don't want to be the universal manager or the manager of the universe or the queen of all that is, that what you really want to be is, the empress. The empress does nothing. She just rides the wave. She's in her boat, her royal barge, being carried downstream. And it's that delicious, and it's that wonderful, and it's that easy. And so it's amazing. And of course, what's so fascinating is that this is where the baby's finger moves the mountain. Willingness gives you leverage that is beyond any application of force that you could ever, ever, ever give. No amount of force can do as much in a year as willingness can do in a moment. Because force means you're actually moving against, resisting your own powerful creations. And oddly enough, this is what we were saying earlier, and we were saying, look, you don't want to talk about pushing something away vibrationally, and you don't want to be talking about something static. So our one friend said, I want to be balanced. And we said, no, that's static. What you want is evolution. You want forward motion. You want your vibration to be in the arena, the thought to be in the arena of evolution and expansion, because that's going to happen. That happens no matter what. So when you're pushing against something and you've got all this resistance and trying to keep it in place because you want to make sure that the bad thing doesn't happen to you, for example, what you're doing quite literally is applying a tremendous amount of force to your own creation. And in doing so, you will lose, because You're stronger than you are. And what we mean by that is that the you that creates, which is the real you, is much more powerful than the you that thinks that it can manage. Because the you that thinks you can manage has no allies. No one is helping you manage. That's why it feels that's why it feels bad. That's why it feels like going upstream, uphill, pushing, making, doing, getting, fixing. That's why it feels that way. It feels intensely bad because everything has abandoned you. But that's not really what happened. You've abandoned yourself when you do it. And then when you're willing, you're just coming home to yourself, to where all the power is, right here in this moment, right now, in your openness and your allowing. And the reason why it seems like openness and allowing to your personality is because your personality is there at the tip of the arrow. And the rest of the arrow is what's carrying the whole story. And you, as you call yourself, don't know anything about what's back behind you. That's the how, that's the mechanism, that's the machine that works on your behalf in infinitely intelligent sorts of ways. So this is so wonderful, isn't it? You get to, in other words, get to have your cake and eat it too. You get to have what you want, and you get to feel good about it. And you're going to get even more than what you expected. That's even juicier.
I love it. It's like a rampage on willingness. So I get it. And then there are these thoughts that come up like, well, I thought it was about choosing and having my preference. And what about like the integrity? Like some of it feels like, well, I'll just let the car run right over me kind of thing.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's your 4 or 5-year-old self.
Oh,
Ideas from way back then. Well, that period of time is when your culture and your parents, your family, your friends, everybody was introducing you to how to use resistance for no fun and very little profit.
Wow.
That's when you were being told, 3, 4, 5, that's when you were being told, stop running amok. Stop being yourself. And, undoubtedly, if we could get your mother in particular on this conversation, she would probably have some astonishing stories of how you were not going down that road.
I was kind of stubborn, yes.
Kind of stubborn. Undoubtedly, having said it in English, there's undoubtedly a much better word in Romanian that means, stubbornness to the amplified power. That would probably be a little bit more accurate. The reason why we're pointing that out is not because you were a terrible child, but because you were very determined to stay in alignment with yourself for as long as you could. That's what that stubbornness evolved out of. And now, when someone comes along and says, oh, Tiffle, so easy. Yes, those parts of you that guarded up, that built the foundation that was going to keep everything at bay, are very suspicious. Very suspicious. Oh, yes, no, and it's their job. They're doing exactly what you want them to do. It's just your job to not pay attention to them and to turn away from them and let them evolve away because their function doesn't really serve you like it used to. But yes, no, they're just, standing there kind of folding their arms saying, well, why don't you just let the car roll over you then? Just stay on, just go get on the freeway and lay down and let's find out what willingness is really about. Because it's trying to protect you. This is too, and you're not the only one, but in your self-development, you developed, let's say, cynicism and skepticism. Perfectly powerful approaches. There's nothing right or wrong about them, but you developed them, we'll just use those words, as a way to make sure it was originally designed to help stay in alignment, but over time it became more about just rejecting what anybody says. Unless you granted a little doorway into that portal, into that wall, you just weren't gonna accept it. I don't care what you say. I'm not gonna allow that in. And that can serve you now, as in, it doesn't really matter what all these dissenting voices internally have to say. I'm following what feels better, or whatever you're doing, whatever your approach is. But yes, they're offended, and they're supposed to be offended. That's the job you gave them. And as you embrace that and allow, are willing to let them have their say, and just go, whatever it is that they're saying, they evolve. They become something different. But it starts with thank you, right? Magic words. Thank you. Thank you for doing what I asked you to do. Thank you for being the thought that I created. Thank you. I honor you. I have great esteem for you. I am very grateful for all the things that you brought me. And that right there, that's not, the only response to that is evolution. Because that's you putting that thought in the wanted column, just like the idea of putting the other thing you were guarding against into the wanted column. It doesn't mean everything changes tomorrow or today, but it does mean that, anytime you meet a bit of resistance like that, you can just greet it as the friend that it is and say, it's okay, perfectly fine, and then watch it change, and it will. This is really good stuff, isn't
it? Yeah. Wow. I love it. And so what you said in there, that it was originally designed to stay in alignment so that you can stay in alignment with yourself. That's what, supposedly kids do around age 2 when they discover the word no. It's like now they get to have preference and they get to stay in alignment with their preference.
Well, they always had preference. What's happening is they're responding. They're not learning to say the word no. They have finally given up, in a way, to the pressure of partition. Because very young children have very strong preferences. Those preferences are out loud and are defined. And, what's happening is, this for you might be a very simple thing for you to conceive. Very, very simple. Think about your mother and think about how old she was when you were 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
However many, 20, whatever she was, right?
Yeah.
Now, think about yourself at that age. And think about what it's like to have, because no child that you have ever been in the presence of was as headstrong as you, correct?
Probably, yeah.
Right. So think about what it's like there's your mother sort of innocently going along the way, la, 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 I'm just being a normal person, having a normal life, la, 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 la. And here is this vortex that emerges out of her womb and comes in like a white tornado and says, I'm here, deal with me. You had very strong preferences. Now, we're not pointing a finger at you, but we think this is an easy thing for you to see.
Yes.
You had very strong preferences. The word no is something you had to be taught. If you'll notice, if you think about a very, very tiny baby, if you pinch a little baby, which we would never recommend, but if you were to do that by accident, or, you're carefully doing this or that and there's an accidental bump, that child immediately goes into red alert. And then when red alert is done, it stops. And you can placate, you can, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, which is placating and smoothing, right? That's placating and smoothing out the contrast. Don't be contrasty, don't cry, everything is fine, you're okay. When someone is, and we're not saying don't do this, but we're just saying this is how the culture works. You hold this little tiny baby, and you say, you're going to be okay, and you're saying it for yourself. You're not saying it for the baby. Because the baby doesn't even understand what you're saying, doesn't understand the words. The vibration is, oh, dear God, please stop crying, because it is bothering me. Now, occasionally someone will be holding a baby, and it doesn't bother them that they're crying, and it's a different story. But we're talking about more of what most people do. So They're holding this baby, a little tiny baby, who is just basically turned on the red alert because nerve endings are saying pain, and that's what the baby does. It just says, ah, it's pain. And then the pain subsides because the baby is in alignment with the pain, and it's okay with it. And we wouldn't say comprehends what it means, but stays in alignment with itself. And then it stops. But maybe not as soon as one might want, the one who's the caretaker, but certainly it stops. Then the baby is hungry and lets that siren off. And then the baby, is tired of feeling wet clothes around its bum, and then that particular siren goes off. And the baby is cranky because it's kind of in and out of different things and dealing with different vibrations. And that alarm goes off. But at no point does the baby not have preferences. Oh, you're holding a massively powerful manifester in your arms. The most powerful being that you will ever know is that little tiny baby. And they are absolutely manifesting. They've got you wrapped around their little finger. All those alarms go off. You immediately jump. Frank was in the parking lot the other day, and there was a little tiny baby being carried, and he felt like the magnet was being pulled, and he wanted to run over to this woman and say, I need to stand over you while you carry this baby because we have to protect the baby at all costs. And that feeling was so intense because, of course, we've been talking about this for a while, but also because Frank really was paying attention to, he could feel the child, and the child as a powerful manifester who had no interest in him, but just was like a magnet drawing all of these people, anyone and everyone, to care for, to comfort, to carry, to do as the baby wanted. What happens over time is people who have children who are very well-meaning get sick and tired of basically being bossed around all the time. And their preferences start to assert themselves. And it's distressing, undoubtedly, to the parent. Because the parent is thinking, but I can love my child unconditionally, but oh my God, I wish it would shut up. This is too much. I can't do this for whatever reason. So the no is basically, once the child figures out, oh, this is how they're doing that thing, the no is not the assertion of a preference, not initially. If you'll notice, children love playing with the word no. They love to see what reaction they get. They love it. They just think it's the most fun game. And no one else particularly thinks it's a fun game because in your culture, saying no, as you well know, is not a good idea. Not well supported. So the preferences are powerful and they start at the very beginning. They get basically filed down by the child, not by the culture. The child knew this was going to happen. They knew you can't come from this place of all light and expect to see rainbows. In order to get rainbows, you're going to have to be willing to say no. You're going to have to be willing to say, I don't, I won't, I can't, take it away from me. Because the world of contrast, which is the world that they've created, that they've emerged into, has all sorts of things in it that were not at all part of the story from a non-physical perspective. But that's why they're here. They're here in a mountain of resistance. That's how they get color. That's how they get sound. That's how they get flavor, aroma, what it feels like to be held. So these babies know what they're doing, and the no, just to sort of bring it all home, the no is something that has to be developed. We don't mean has to, because there are plenty of children that are called developmentally disabled, or whatever term is being used, who don't really know how to say no. But it's not that they don't know how to, it's that they don't want to. But that's another story for another day. We certainly have had many examples in these calls about one particular person who, is so in alignment with himself that he does exactly what he wants to do, and basically everyone around him just deals with it. We're not saying this is right or wrong,
so
good or bad.
Sorry.
Please.
I was just thinking, you've kind of redefined what that no is. It's like, Oh, oh, it's how the baby learns uh, in a way to push against.
Oh yes,
No.
no, that's what it's for. That's what everyone is doing around it. The child takes a fork and wants to explore what happens when you put a fork in a sock and an outlet, and everyone says no, right? Well, it is, and this is, that part of you that wanted the car to run over you is now sort of getting its interest piqued, because this is the thing. This is the thing. If you just do any old thing, you're going to end up sticking a fork in an outlet. That's what you're going to do. And then it'll all be over. You'll just be burnt to a crisp, and that's all there is to it. And no one wants that to happen. So, yes, the resistance is there, but that's also how, in a way, you decide how to navigate your reality. Because we're not suggesting that anyone should hand a fork to any child and direct it to an outlet. But what we are saying is children know more about what they're doing than you tend to think they do. Because they're usually the smartest person in the room. They're usually the most aligned person in the room. They may not be intelligent, but they're smart. And they're certainly plugged in, tapped in. We're not saying, and you should then worship them or make them better or say this is better, because that tapped in, tuned in, if you remember in your own childhood, you don't appreciate the contrast. We're talking about the difference in the color, not, the good versus the bad. We mean like the difference between orange, yellow, and red. You don't appreciate the contrast as a child as much as you do as you have spent more time in this experience. The more time you spend here, the more you begin to realize the true value of all of your creation. Because if you're going to be born into this culture, you're going to be taught not to appreciate it. Even the people who think that they're teaching their children to appreciate their reality are still bringing tremendous amounts of resistance. But that's because that's what the child wants, not because that's what the parent is doing wrong.
Wow, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And we thank you. A very, very powerful and delicious conversation indeed.